All right, great. All right, well, let's get started. So welcome everybody. We're so happy to see you here. I'm your host, Danielle Duplin, co-founder of Agency, Worldwide Innovation for Living Longer and Aging Better. And part of Agency is this wonderful Founders Over 55 community that launched about 2 years ago. We are over 400 members strong. More and more folks tune in to every one of our events, and we love seeing this community thrive and grow. So we're very excited today to talk about how to grow your company. We sent out a survey a little while back, and overwhelming, all of you had responded that you would like more information about how to do more marketing, how to tell your story, how to use technology, how to really connect with new customers and prospects. So we are here and gathered to talk about, core business building skills with the lens that each of us are doing this work as our encore career. Perhaps we are serial entrepreneurs and have run and started companies throughout our career. Perhaps we are like reinventing ourselves after a long corporate career in a particular industry. Perhaps we're building companies based on our passions and we're trying to turn that into a little extra income later in life, or we're here because we have something big that we want to create in the world and we're growing a huge enterprise. So all of it, we welcome everyone, wherever stage you're at, and we believe that age is an asset when building a company. And so we're going to really lean into that, but we're also going to talk about basic building skills that should happen regardless of what size company you're running and where you are in that journey. So before we kick it to our keynote speaker, I would just like to introduce my fellow steering committee members on the Founders Over 55. So I'll toss it to Doug, who is right next to me in this Brady Bunch gallery. So Doug, say hi.
Hi, my name is Doug Dixon, and I'm a board chair of Encore Boston Network. We encourage people over 50 to make a difference in the world through work, through service, and through social action. And a big part of, an increasing part of work in terms of the interest of our members and participants is entrepreneurship. So we're pleased to be a part of Founders Over 55.
Thank you, Doug. And Jerry, say hi.
Hi there, I'm Jerry Wolosenko. I've been involved in entrepreneurial activity for the last 35 to 40 years, and I'm part of this group because I'd like to help people along that path. It can be rewarding both personally and financially, but it comes with a lot of challenges, and we are working together to help all of you try to overcome those challenges. So welcome.
Thank you. And Paul Michaels, who's running our tech.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Michaels, and I'm the founder of Get Fit Made Easy. Basically, what I do is I help entrepreneurs who are busy get fit, boost their health and productivity when they don't have time. And so this, for me, I'm sort of the tech help here, and also learning alongside of you guys. And I'm very excited about today's event. Thank you.
Great. So just real quick, we're so excited to see you all here. And as I said, our group keeps growing and growing. So I'd love just like a quick show of hands. Who if this is their first time joining the Founders Over 55? All right, welcome. Yes, it would be great. We see you on camera. Awesome, where you can use like the raise hand icon. Beautiful. Welcome, Stacy. Welcome, David. I don't know if I can get everybody here. Linda, welcome, welcome. James, Paul V, Kerry. This is brilliant. Well, we will have a networking after, well, we'll have some breakouts after our keynote, and then stick around for some extra networking where we get to meet one another. Oftentimes we can do some matchmaking right in the moment if you're looking for particular talent or collaborator. And so we encourage you to stick around, and we're glad that you're here. You could also look at all of our previous curriculum that we've hosted. This is our 13th meetup if you go to foundersover55.com. And then with that, I think it would be really helpful for all of us to understand like who's in the room and where you are at like what stage of your company. So Paul, if you can put up our poll, we'd love for you to just take a second to let us know where you are in your journey. Are you just getting started, exploring and reinventing? Are you actually planning your company? Are you launching in market? Where are you in your growth? Great. Great. This is good. We have like the full arc of the stages here. This is brilliant.
We have 72% of the participants. Can we hear 85? Anybody going to give us 85%? Nope.
Great.
We seem to be stuck at 75. So I'm going to end the poll.
So this would be great because what we do talk about at Founders Over 55 is the different stages of entrepreneurship and what skills you really need to lean into depending on what stage you're at. So for those of you who are a little further along, like you're in your expanding phase, it'll be really interesting when you get to the breakouts, just to kind of share some of those insights with the folks who are just getting started exploring and in their planning phases, and share any kind of anecdotes of like when you were stuck and how you got unstuck, because we know that is a big part of the process. So great. All right, so then Paul, if you can just throw up the next poll to let us know what size company are you going for?
One sec.
We're going to talk about some basic, key marketing concepts about storytelling, but how that manifests does change based on the size of your company and the kind of reach that you're going for.
All right, so I don't know what you can see or what you can't see. I'm sharing hold on. I'm sharing the results. Can you see the growth part? Or sorry, the size.
Oh, there
part.
it is. Okay, there it is, the size part. Okay, so many of you are going for solopreneur or small team. Got it. Yep. Okay, I can see that. So, so that's great. So, clearly as a solopreneur, it's all on you, right? And so a big part of our community here is to help you lean into folks who have complementary skills. So there are folks, in fact, on this call who are building marketing companies, who are like standing up small shops to help you, expand your footprint online. So, partner with them and other folks who might help with other parts of your organization, like maybe operations or so forth. So solopreneurs, we're stronger together. And so really use this community to help find collaborators to complement your skills. Great. Awesome. All right. So then with that, again, welcome everybody. And so we're really excited to welcome our keynote speaker, Steve Werner, who has a passion for helping people tell the stories about their business that really help to convert customers. And so we know that storytelling shows up in a lot of different formats, in one-line tweets, in your marketing copy, on your one-pagers, on your websites, how you describe your company to potential customers and prospects. So we're here to learn about some of the story selling secrets that has helped Steve help his customers reach millions of customers worldwide. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Steve.
Welcome, Thank you so much. This is an awesome looking group. I love all of you that have your camera on. I am very interactive. So I come from a live public speaking background. If you don't have your camera on right now, I would definitely encourage you to turn it on. This is meant to be an interactive presentation, so I will call on people who put their hands up. I might call on you if you don't have your hands up. You never know. So I'll start with, how many of you in here have been to a cocktail party and you've just been like, oh my goodness, because you see the realtor or you see the salesperson coming from across the room and you run? Who in here has ever had that happen, right? Well, let me ask you this. How many of you have been on a networking event in the last, 6-8 months, and you've gotten put in a room and there's somebody in there who just talks and talks and talks and runs you over. Now I can tell from the people who are laughing right now, you've had that happen, right? Like you're supposed to get 60 seconds. And you're like, man, this person's been going for 90 seconds. They've taken up all the time. Well, how many of you would love not to be that person and get some results? Anyone? All right. We're seeing some hands go up. Good, 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 good. So how many of you think that you are good at telling stories? Anyone? Okay. A few hands. Good, good, good. So the thing that if you don't take anything else away from my presentation, I want you to take away that people are buying you. Whatever you are selling, there were a lot of solo entrepreneurs in here. This is even more important for you if you're a solo entrepreneur. People are buying you. They're not necessarily buying the thing that you do as much as they are buying you. I want you to think about, just because how many people have seen somebody on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere online, and they just are posting all the time. They're posting facts, they're posting things that they're doing in their business. Has anyone seen that? And do you think that that is getting them very much business?
I hope so.
It's probably not, because somebody who is slightly annoying, when they start posting more and more and more, they just get more annoying. And then what does that lead to? That leads to pressing the block button, right? You press the three little dots and you're like, I no longer want to hear from this person, but I'll stay their friend. So what we're going to talk about is stories, specifically the 5 stories that you can use in your business. These can be used on social media. They can be used in any networking conversation. So I'll give you guys something as a powerful takeaway just to start. When I do networking, we'll do some networking after this, I lead with something that gets people to say yes and solves a pain point. You actually heard what I lead with. I say, you get 90 seconds. In 90 seconds, I say, who in here has been on a webinar in the last 60 days? Who in here has fallen asleep on a webinar in the last 60 days? Who in here would love to give a short, powerful webinar that books sales calls? And never has anyone fallen asleep. All right, awesome. That's what I do. I'll be happy to talk to you a little bit about that if you're interested. If not, I can just tell some jokes. It's light. It gets people to raise their hand, and it is way different than leading with a bunch of features and benefits. Everybody, in my opinion, should come up with something fun and snappy to put at the start of their networking, and always lead with the outcome. Start with a pain point that somebody has, and then follow up with the outcome that they really want. So I have a few slides. I'm not super slide heavy, but I am going to share some slides with you because I think it helps inform people, and it adds a little bit to the presentation. But we'll be going in and out of a slide deck. Is that all right with everyone? You guys all good with that? Okay, awesome. So these are from different presentations that I've done throughout the years. And I will go through my story. I'll give examples of everything. But I want to start with, who has ever led with value, right? You're like, I know I can fix this person's business, especially as a solo entrepreneur. We're like, we see that person, we're like, I know I can help them. Or we see somebody in a group like this, and we're like, I know I have exactly what they need. Who in here has ever had that, and you've tried to share that with somebody? And how did that go? Just think about that for a second. I mean, I don't know how many of you have kids. I don't have kids, but I have a lot of nieces and nephews. And the minute you try to tell them something, what happens, right? A wall goes up. They don't want to hear it. They know a better way. In Western society, we have that, right? We're like, the minute somebody tells us something, we're like, well, does that really apply to me? I'm different. Maybe that doesn't apply to me. And we start asking questions. It immediately triggers a wall. The way that we can get around that is through telling stories. Whenever you tell a story, even a bad story, how many of you have watched a television show that you didn't like because somebody else was watching it in the room? Anyone? And do you still find yourself thinking how the character in the story would think and wondering why they're doing certain things? Because we can't help it. The minute we see or hear a story, we become the protagonist in the story. So the light bulb moment that I want you to take away from this is, the reason that you use stories is because people see themselves in it. So our goal is to use strategic stories that we plan out that show people what we do. This is Zig Ziglar. He is one of my favorite mentors. He's one of the first people that I started following in probably 2012. Started listening to some of his audio. But this quote has always stuck with me, and it's, sales is nothing more than transferring your excitement and certainty about your product from yourself to the person who's buying from you. Who in here has ever bought something from somebody who was so excited about what they did? You didn't really know exactly what they did, but you knew they were really excited about it, and you knew that it would be a good fit for you. Has anyone ever had that happen? Maybe once, maybe twice, a few people. That happens a lot. So you want to show up with a lot of certainty. And the best way to convey your certainty is through a story. I'm going to get to the stories in a second. If you're wondering where this presentation is going, I want you to stay with me for just a second and see how we tell a great story. So we're going to go down, and I want to take you through my story. Is that all right with everybody? It'll take about 3 minutes. I'll go through it pretty quick, and then I'm going to show you how you build it. Then we're going to go through the 5 different stories, because there's a pretty proven framework. This is the picture of the framework. So you always start with a train wreck. The train wreck happens all the way over here. The reason you start with a train wreck is because it's what brings the people in and what gets people to pay attention to you, right? We can't help but look at a train wreck. A lot of movies start with something that is high drama, a lot of television. Does everybody follow that okay? So you want to start with something that is a big train wreck moment. So a moment is where you talk about the surroundings. Then you want to talk about the pain points. So the pain points should line up with the pain points that your ideal customer or client has. Pain points, you just can go through them almost in bullet point fashion. Then you want to have a light bulb moment. Light bulb moment is where everything changed for you. Then you want to have the Rocky montage. So I couldn't draw Rocky, but who in here remembers the Rocky montage, right? Anyone? No one remembers Rocky? Okay, I see a couple smiles. So the Rocky montage is where you show people how you earned or learned what you are teaching them. The light bulb moment right here should hook to what you sell. You'll see how this works here in a second. And then last but not least, you want to show a desired outcome that they want that you got. When you do this correctly, people will identify with the pain and the train wreck, right? They might not identify with the train wreck because it might be a little different, but they'll identify with the pain points. Then they'll see you had the transformation. They'll give you authority because they'll see the struggles that you had to perfect the transformation, and they'll see the outcome that you want. Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. Okay, awesome. So I will quickly go through my story, and then I will break it down for you. And then I'll go through the 5 core stories that you need. This first story is referred to as a hero's journey story, or kind of a signature story. It's the story that shows how you earned or learned the main outcome in your business. So I'll give you a couple really high level examples really fast. If you know Dave Ramsey, anyone know Dave Ramsey? I think a lot of people. Okay, cool. So Dave Ramsey's I was struggling financially. I went bankrupt. I had to figure out money management skills. That was the epiphany. He went through a bunch of struggle to do that. And now he came out on the other side as the financial guru, right? See how that goes? It's pretty easy and straightforward. If you like Tony Robbins, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins' story, he started off struggling, thought he was going to be a truck driver, didn't know how to make money, didn't know how to get out of his own way, found NLP, figured out how to fix himself, figured out how to fix a lot of other people, became massively successful. You guys all follow how that works? All right, so before I jump into the story, I'm going to take a really quick poll by a show of hands. How many people in here think that they have a story? Okay, good. About half. If you don't think that you have a story, I will work with you later. I'm happy to help you guys highlight what you do so that you have a story. I'll go through this really quickly. I don't want to take up a whole bunch of time on my story. I'd rather show you guys how stories work. but I think it'll be very informative to go through it. There we go. Okay. So I was sitting in the Frog Bar in Treasure Island in Las Vegas, and I could hear the slot machines behind me. Ching, ching, ching. There were people screaming. There was a lady that was winning at craps. She was yelling. She was so excited. She was making a ton of money. But I was sitting there with a half-eaten hot fudge sundae, an old fashioned that had melted and was lukewarm because I couldn't drink it, because I had just gotten told that I owed over $125,000 and I didn't know what I was going to do. See, 18 months earlier, I had gone to see Tony Robbins and I got really excited. At the time, 2012, I was a fine dining manager in Vail, Colorado. I loved what I was doing, but I felt a calling. I felt like I could do more. So I saved up $30K and I decided that I wanted to hold live events, just like Tony Robbins. So I moved to Las Vegas, and my third day there, this is a picture off my cell phone, I went down and I rented the largest ballroom that I could find at Treasure Island, held 2,000 people. I was so excited. I had 6 months. I needed a lot of stuff. I needed websites. I needed to figure out WordPress. I needed a shopping cart. I needed landing pages. I needed to build an email autoresponder. I need print ads. I need banner ads. I need Facebook ads. How many of you have thought, like, I need this stuff, right? That's where I was, and I didn't understand any of it. This was 2013, and I dived in. So I started trying everything, and I watched my bank account, all that hard-earned money that I had saved up, go from 30K to 20K to 10K to $500. And I didn't know what I was going to do at this point. When I moved to Las Vegas, I rented a small studio because I thought, I've got enough money that I'm going to be here for a year or two. I will figure all this stuff out. How many of you have ever gotten into business and you're like, I've got plenty saved up, I'll figure all this out? Anyone ever had that experience? I see a couple people raising their hand. All right, there's some smiles. So when my bank account hit zero, I was pretty embarrassed. Not only embarrassed, I was scared because I didn't know what I was going to do. So that led me to sitting in the office of the event planner at Treasure Island 6 weeks before my event. This isn't a picture of her, but this looks quite a bit like her. Has anyone in here ever held an event? You get something called a room block. And a room block is a set of hotel rooms that the hotel sets aside for you, and you're responsible for renting them. You're on the line for them. Well, I had over 100 rooms reserved for my room block, and I had sold 0 tickets. Well, the hotel 6 weeks beforehand had caught on to this, and they called me in to ask me what I was going to do with the event space, with the catering that I had planned, and with this room block. When I told them they could either sue me to get the money because I didn't have it, or I'd file bankruptcy. She wasn't real happy with that answer, but I think she kind of knew that that was where it was coming to. That led to me sitting at the bar with my undrank drink and my uneaten hot fudge sundae. From there, I ended up, they didn't sue me. They let me out of my contract. They held my deposit. I moved into a friend's utility room. This is actually a utility room in their house. I still get a little emotional looking at this picture. All this stuff came from the Salvation Army because at the time I had one credit card left with about $3,500 on it. And this is what I bought. I started going to the library a lot and reading, and I found this thing right here. Who remembers what that is? Does anyone remember what a cassette tape is? Well, I found this box of cassette tapes, and I took them home with me, along with every other book that I could find on marketing, because I figured I needed to really learn marketing. And the cassette tape was by this guy named Dan Kennedy, and he told me that I was an idiot. That was the light bulb moment. I realized that what was going wrong, the reason that nobody had bought a ticket to my event, is because I was teaching people instead of telling them a story, instead of making them the star of what they were. Dan taught me all about marketing. And from there, I was able to go through all of this, learn from Dan, and I was able to hold my first event. First event, this is a picture of it. This was at South Point Casino. I ended up making about $9,000, which seemed like an immense amount of money to me, going from being broke and having a credit card to holding this event. From there, I started consuming information. If you had an event that you went to, that you held, and it made you $9,000, would you start learning everything that you could? Well, that's what I did. I started reading all the books that I could on storytelling, more than 218 books. I know because I gave them all away when I left Las Vegas. I also started joining masterminds and consuming all the information that I could. I ended up working for ClickFunnels for more than a year and a half, presenting from stage, selling ClickFunnels all over the country. Did that presentation more than 100 times. I was in Joe Polish's Genius Network as part of Ryan Dice's stuff. I worked with Frank Kern, John Childers, Jay Abraham, and Dan Kennedy. Those were all people that were part of my mentor team. I paid more than $280,000 to. Something interesting started happening. I started holding more and more events. Some were 100 people. I held one that was over 750, and I did a lot of smaller events that were 20 to 30 people all over the US. Over the next 7 years, I held more than 48 personal live events. I had more than 82 live speaking engagements. I held 14 client events, more than 100 digital speaking events, over 100 VIP consulting days. And I built a successful business. Now I'm going to exit out of the presentation. So that's the story. Does all of that make sense to where we were earlier? Thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe? Like, you guys can follow the framework, okay? The main reason I wanted to tell you the story was so that you could see the framework in action, because every story follows the same thing. Train wreck up front, pain points, your light bulb moment when everything started to change, your Rocky montage when you learned everything, and then the outcome that they want. Anytime you tell a story, you can tell a really short story that follows that exact same principle, the way that I told, not Jim Cramer, geez, the other money guy, earlier. Everybody follow? I see some people. I don't want anyone to fall asleep. Okay, good. There we go. Now I can see everyone. All right. So there are 5 core stories that every business can use. And this is what the stories do, is it fights running up to somebody, being that person that's at the cocktail party that runs up and just word vomits on people, right? You don't ever want to be that person, because it's not going to lead to business. We used these 5 stories to grow a therapist business. I have a therapist client who lives in Omaha, Nebraska. She wanted to move from a insurance-based business to a cash-based business. She also wanted to double her pricing so she could see half as many people. She was seeing on average 50 to 55 clients a week. Anyone in here a therapist? Can anyone imagine what that would be like? That's a lot of therapy clients. She wanted to cut that number in half, and she wanted to move to cash-based practice. We use these stories and 0 ad spend marketing to grow her business. So I know that this stuff works. I've used it in my own business. I've helped more than probably 200 clients at this point work through these stories. They work in presentations. They work in social media. I'll answer questions at the end if you have specific questions. The first story is the legend story, or the hero's journey story, which we just went through. The key to this story is that it talks about your journey so that people know how you earned it or learned it. The second story that you have are smaller stories called parables. I use a lot of biblical references. I don't know why. It wasn't intentional. I was raised in a really strict Christian home. I'm not anymore, but I think that's where it came from. So I just don't want you guys to think that it's there for any reason. But the second one are parables. So a parable is something that is built. It's a story that is built around the key teaching points in your business. If somebody needs to understand something, I've worked with a lot of financial planners. If in order for the financial planner to sell their service, the customers need to understand certain things, it's much easier and much more engaging to tell it through a parable than to try to teach it to somebody. So who in here would like to hear an example? Anyone? Okay, cool. So I want you guys to take a moment and I want you to go back in time and I want you to think about your favorite teacher, whether it was in high school or college. I want you to remember what their classroom was like, remember what they looked like. Now I want you guys to think about your least favorite teacher. Remember walking into their class. If it was like me, we still have blackboards. This is before dry erase boards. You walk into the class, right? I would sit down. The guy would be at the board teaching like crazy. He might look over his shoulder and say something. If you're like me, you paid attention for a minute or two, then you got into overwhelm. Then you put your head down on the desk. Maybe you passed notes. Sometimes I just left out the back door because I knew I wouldn't be missed. Now put that on one side and the other side, your favorite teacher. If you remember your favorite teacher, you probably walked into their classroom. They might have been joking around. They probably knew your name. They were probably fun. They probably made learning more interesting, even if they taught a little bit less. They were definitely more engaging. Now, I want you guys to ask yourselves the question, who do you remember more from right now? All these years later, I can tell you things that were taught by teachers who goofed off 90% of the time, but made learning way more exciting because I was actually engaged. It's not about how much you teach. It's about engagement. It's about being somebody that they know, like, and trust. Does everybody follow how that's a parable? So I want you all to think about what are the key things that somebody has to know before they hire you. I know there's a lot of solopreneurs out there. How many of you are in service-based business? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, so if you are in a service-based business, I want you to think about what are the key things that your dream clients need to know and understand before they hire you. If you can make a list of 2 or 3 things and then come up with stories that show that, instead of you telling them, you'll do really, really well because those stories can fit in anywhere. I can tell that story at a cocktail party without people knowing who I am at all. And then they have the realization. They're like, oh yeah, you're totally right. By the way, what does that have to do with anything you do? Well, I teach people how to build really engaging conversations that they can give from any stage to grow their business. Oh, well, I'd like help with that. It opens the door without me ever having to say anything. So that's story number 2. Story number 3. Story number 3, staying with the biblical theme, are miracles. So a miracle is really your client testimonial told as a case study. Anytime somebody asks you a question about your business, it is better to either answer them with a case study or ask them a question about why that's important to them than to give them a direct answer. Because if you give them a direct answer, they will argue with you. If instead you say, if somebody asks me, well, I'm a little bit smaller business, I'm not sure if this will work for me. And I say, well, I just want to tell you really quickly about my client, Debbie. Debbie came to me. She's been in business for 7 years. She doesn't use social media at all. She was wondering if something like this would work for her. She had tried webinars before and had almost no response. We started working together. Within 6 weeks, we had her entire webinar built around her core stories. She went on to do a small presentation to 30 people and she made more than $14,000 in her first webinar. She went on to do more than $50,000 in her first 2 months. So I think it does work pretty well for small businesses. I've helped several other people who aren't on social do this. Do you guys see how that specifically overcomes the objection, answers their question, but does it through a story? Does everybody get that one? Okay, so what I want you to write down for that specifically is come up with what are the main questions that people ask you? What are the main objections that people have to what you do? And how can you preempt them with a story? If you can come up with those stories, so this is what I do. One of the reasons that I have so many of these, I use 3x5 note cards. I'm super analog. I have some computers. I like tech, but I grew up like taking notes. I still take notes. I still buy all the books. For those of you who don't know, I live in Airbnbs. I've been in Austin, which is where I live now, for about 4 weeks. All of these books back here either traveled with me or I bought them since I was here. Then when I leave and I move somewhere new, I donate all the books. I like super analog stuff. So to tell stories, I take a 3x5 note card and I always start with, and I go through that story arc that I drew out. What's the train wreck? What are the pain points? What's the epiphany? What's the Rocky montage? And what's the outcome that they want? Then I keep them and I go through them. Anytime I'm getting ready for a presentation, I can go through and I can find stories that fit the group that I'm talking to. It also helps me to memorize them because I can just flip through them a couple minutes every day and I know them. So does everybody understand legend, parables, and miracles? Are we good so far? Can I get a hands up? Let me keep you guys awake. All right, doing good. Paul, I'm really surprised you're not on your treadmill. I was expecting to see you on your treadmill. Okay. The next story is one of my favorites. Who in here has seen a website or had somebody tell them, I'm trustworthy, I act with integrity? Has anyone ever seen that on somebody's website? I see a lot of smirks. What's the first thing you think when somebody says, I have integrity? Why are you telling me that you have integrity? Do I look like are you going to try to sell me something? It immediately sets off alarms, right? But yet that's what people do. And I think most people do it because they want people to know they're honest, right? I'm honest. I work a lot with service providers. And what I hear is I will work harder than anybody else. Right now I have a CPA who is trying really hard to get my business for next year. Are there any CPAs in here? Okay, I'll tell the story. He's trying really, really hard to get my business for next year. And what he's doing is he's constantly telling me, I'll work harder than anybody else for you. You can trust me. I promise you, all of your stuff is kept safe. Well, he's telling me that. So what happens when you tell somebody something? You immediately put up a wall and you're like, I don't know if I believe it. So what a value story is story number 4. What a value story does is it highlights your core values in a way that nobody will ever question. So one of mine that comes at the end of my hero's journey that I'll tell you here so you can see what it is. I went on to hold live events for clients. We held more than 14 live events for clients leading up to COVID. When COVID hit, I had 4 events for the year on the books. I had just held one. We literally held an event a week before lockdown in 2020. I was in Phoenix. I was hired by the company in Phoenix. They flew me there. We held the event. It went great. I thought I figured we're going to do this lockdown thing. 2 weeks from now, the country's going to open up. We're going to be back to normal. I don't know if any of you thought that might happen. I went and bought an ice cream machine. If I share my slides with you, you can actually see the ice cream machine and me making ice cream. I started running marathons again. I was just like, I'm going to entertain myself. Halfway through this, I had bought a ticket before lockdown to go see Van Halen. Anyone a Van Halen fan? All right. So I bought a ticket to see Van Halen. I called Ticketmaster because it was the concert was in March. They said, nope, we're not refunding anybody. We will give you a ticket to Van Halen next time they go on tour. Well, if you know Van Halen, you don't know if they're ever going to go on tour again. That was my thought. But they said, we're not refunding you, nor will we credit you to anything else. I was really frustrated. In that moment, I realized I had 3 events coming up for clients that we didn't know if we were going to hold. I had over $100,000 that they had paid me. My fee was $25,000 to $50,000 to hold an event. And I had that money sitting in the bank. And I knew I had to refund it because they hadn't asked yet. We were still in the lockdown, but I knew that it was the right thing to do. So the next day I called all of them up and I refunded, and I watched my bank account lose $100,000. I don't care how much money you have. That's painful. But I knew it was the right thing to do. Out of that, one of those clients said, hey, instead of doing a live event, can you help us do a webinar? I said, yeah, I've done some webinars for some other people, used to work for ClickFunnels. Let's build the funnel. Let's run some ads. We ended up doing over $80,000 that weekend, and it launched me into webinars. Now, over the last 18 months, we've done 32 webinars with clients and over $10 million in sales. But all of it came out of me refunding somebody. That's a value story. What do you know from that story, especially told in the context of my hero's journey? You know that you can trust me. You know that even when it's painful, I'm going to take care of my customers first. Does everybody see how that works? So I want you to think about, and honesty, integrity, those are great values. Those should definitely be there. But I want everybody to come up with one value that is important to you that makes you different. Because going back to the very beginning of this presentation, people are buying you more than they are buying your product or service. So if you can be interesting, entertaining, different, quirky, weird, people are buying you. I lived in Chicago for a while, and the saying in Chicago was, I've got a guy. Oh, I need my house cleaned. I've got a guy. I need a restaurant to go to. I've got a place for you. That's what people want. So how do you become memorable? I've told you 3 different small stories on here that are highly memorable to me. One of which is, anyone want to take a shot? You guys are so quiet. It's because you're all muted.
Your best teacher.
That's one. I live in Airbnbs.
And your hot fudge sundae.
Perfect. Those are all things that you know about me that differentiate me. So my challenge to you with the value story, honesty, integrity, great. Come up with 1 or 2 that are highly important to you. I live in Airbnbs all over the country. I've lived in, at this point, I want to say 19 different states, all over the country, 3 to 4 months at a time. I'm 40, I'll be 44 next week. I'm not married. I don't have kids because travel and experience is more important to me than that. That's the highlight of the story. So does everybody understand what to do with value stories? Awesome. Those stories you can tell anywhere because you're not actually selling with them, but they will get people to know, like, and trust you, which is the first key to opening the door to sales, to becoming the person that they're like, oh, I got a person. You guys might have heard 3% of any market is ready to buy right now. The other 97%, you're just warming up, but they will refer you to their friends if they know, like, and trust you. So become somebody that they know, like, and trust. Become somebody memorable. Tell some quirky stories. Quirky stories always win because our minds love curiosity. They love things that are interesting and weird and stick out. Okay, last story is your product story. So your product or service story is very similar to your hero's journey. Your hero's journey, you're the star. It's why things changed for you. Your product story is what makes your product different in the marketplace. Most people lead with what their product or service is. This should be the very last thing that you talk about until you get asked about it. And when you do talk about it, instead of telling somebody directly what it is, if you tell a story about it, it works much better. So I'll give you mine. Mine is very brief. People say, well, aren't webinars dead? Like, it seems like everybody's zoomed out. Everybody is sick of being on webinars and listening. My answer is, yeah, the very first webinar we did, we were successful because they had a list, they were willing to drive traffic. When I started doing all the research and really diving into what made webinars, I saw so many people dropping off. People were turning off their cameras. Show up rates. I'm going through the pain points right now. I'm stepping out of the story to tell you. Going through the pain points. Show up rates were way down. Ad spend was way up. Conversion was lower. People were starting to lose money on webinars, which hadn't happened since they started in the mid 2000s. My epiphany was, what could I take from live events to make them highly interactive, shorter, way more entertaining, but way more rapport building, trust building, and get the sale at the end. Through trial and error on myself, I was able to come up with some methods that really, really worked. We then went on to build this with more than 30 entrepreneurs and did more than $10 million in sales. See how the product story is not about me, but it's about how we did something different with our product or service to make it stand out in the market. Does that make sense to everyone? So I want your homework around that is, and it should almost never, ever be longer than what I just did, 60 seconds. You want the reason why. What's the first thing that happens when somebody doesn't give you what you want? What's the first thing that happens when people don't give up things easily? You lean in naturally, right? Dating relationships, if one person pulls away, the other person starts to chase. Same thing happens here. If you dump a whole bunch of stuff, somebody asks you, I worked with a financial planner. Somebody would be like, well, what should I invest in? They would go on a 10-minute diatribe about all the stocks, where the market was, and way overwhelm people. If instead they either ask a question or gave a small little bit of an answer, people lean in and they ask questions. The more people ask questions, the more it's a commitment on their part, the more they'll pay attention, and it will lead to a sales conversation or a conversation in general. Does that make sense to people? That's why your product story should be short, 60 seconds or less. That concludes the 5 stories. You guys saw examples of all of them. I gave you some clear frameworks. Depending on time, Danielle, you tell me where we're at. I'm happy to take some questions. If you don't think you have a story, I'm happy to help you build one really quick. Whatever would be the best, you guys let me know.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I've been documenting the 5 different types of stories. So by all means, we'd love to hear from the community, either some questions, clarifications, or an idea that you want to toss out to the group and kind of practice a little bit.
So I saw one question. Michael asks, should the train wreck always be about me? Yes. So if you are vulnerable, this is something a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. They're like, if I tell people I failed at something, they will never hire me. The exact opposite is true. Because as long you don't, does anyone remember when Britney Spears shaved her head way back when?
Mm-hmm.
So she shaved her head and she shared it as she was going through the meltdown. Probably not the ideal time to share it. But if she would have waited till she was on the other side of it, everybody relates to somebody who has gone through a struggle. So if you share vulnerable stuff that you are going through, if you guys aren't on my email list, I don't know why anyone here would be. I email 5 to 7 times a week and I tell stories. I don't usually talk about business. I tell stories. I have an over 30% open rate and I get a ton of responses. People love to hear, and I'm vulnerable about things that are going on. I talk about things that I'm struggling with. I talk about anything that's going on in my life because people love to hear that stuff. Now, if you're having a huge breakdown or some really challenging problem, you don't want to ever come across as a mess, but you can definitely come across as real and authentic. That will get people to know, like, and trust you more than anything else. How does the storytelling and story arc change when dealing with people around the globe? That is a good question. How many people watch Squid Game? And did the story change very much? That's a great question. Squid Game was really easy to point to. I actually watched the very first episode last night. I don't own a TV and I don't watch TV very much, but I watched it last night because everybody was talking about it. So storytelling around the world does not really change. I would focus first off, though, on telling a great story. Your marketplace, although we can easily be global due to Zoom now, your marketplace is near you. Start with people that I like doing things in person. So I'll go grab coffee with people. I'll hold small local events. meetups, in my opinion, I grew my entire business moving city to city to city, doing meetups and small localized speaking events, as well as speaking at other people's events, and then flying to larger events and speaking. Start with what's local to you because you can get face-to-face at least somewhat with them. That's what I would recommend. What other questions? Trainwreck. If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand. Some people really want to be there. They have a really hard time with the hero's journey. This is the one place that I will say that you can do something different. If you don't want to tell your hero's journey, some people are like, I just didn't have a crash and burn moment. I didn't have a train wreck. I didn't overcome anything. I was just naturally good at it. Maybe I went to college for it. Maybe I was raised in a business. Then you want to tell your passion story. Passion story follows the same thing, only it's why you are incredibly passionate and how you helped somebody overcome. So when you talk about the pain points, you say, I'm really passionate about helping somebody. When Debbie came to me, she started crying on our first Zoom call because she was so frustrated trying to speak and do her own webinar. She had tried speaking at other live events and she had never gotten business from it. And she actually broke down crying. Train wreck, pain points that Debbie went through. But I'm saying why I'm passionate about it. So I'm taking life events, but I'm saying why I'm passionate, why I love helping other people, why I love doing what I'm doing. So if you don't have anyone who raised their hand and said they didn't have a hero's journey, that's something that you can do. Does that make sense? Nobody's fallen asleep yet. We're doing good. We're winning. I am putting my scheduler in the chat. If anyone here wants to have a meeting, this will put us on a 20-minute meeting. Happy to answer any questions to anyone here. If you want to see how this would work in your business, if you have a specific question that you don't want to share, please book time with me. I am happy to meet with you. I will tell you that my schedule is really tight going into the holidays, but that's an ongoing scheduler. Happy to meet with you. I think Danielle put my email in the chat as well, or in the notes. They're somewhere. Feel free to reach out to me if there's something I can do to help you.
So does anybody have any other questions that they want to toss out to the larger group before we go to breakouts?
I have one question, and that is, Steve, you've talked a lot about making this personal in terms of talking about your story.
Mm-hmm.
But would you agree that it can also be useful to tell other people's stories, if in fact those are more relatable than in fact yours might be?
Yes and no. So the miracles, which were the third kind of story, you definitely want to share those. But the main point that I want to make is people are buying you more than anything else. And even though a lot of times people say all the time, I don't know what stories to tell, my life isn't interesting, I guarantee you, everyone here, we've been around for 44 years at least. We have interesting stories. You just don't see them because you're too close to them. Telling other people's stories is great. You'll notice I told several stories on here. I told Tony Robbins' story. I told Dave's story, told Debbie's story. Like, I've told stories that weren't mine, but you need to be the focus. Like, does anyone know who Gary Halbert is? Okay, no hands. So Gary Halbert is considered the greatest copywriter of all time. He did several direct mail pieces in the 80s and 90s that generated in excess of $150 million for himself before going to work for other people. And the main takeaway that he gave to people is, and it mirrors what I'm teaching you, you're not in the financial services business. You're not in the chemicals business. You're not in whatever business you're in first. You're in the you business. So I am in the Steve Werner business, especially if you are a solopreneur. Doug, you are in the Doug business, because if people don't buy you, they will never buy your product or service. So I know that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. A lot of people are like, I just want to do the thing, right? I worked with a chiropractor once. He's like, I'm the best chiropractor. I went to school for more than 20 years. I can do all this amazing stuff. But he wanted to be behind the scenes. That's a really hard business to grow, because at the end of the day, people are buying you more than anything else. They want the outcome, they want the result, but they want somebody that they know, like, and trust to get them the result first and foremost. So you can tell other people's stories. I would say it has to be at least 60-40, with your own stories being the 60%.
Hey, so that's actually a great lead in to our breakout, because what we'd like to do is have each of you practice one of the 5 story types. I think we got a 6th bonus one in there. So the key elements to a story, regardless of length, is the train wreck, kind of how you get into the drama of the story, the particular pain point, the light bulb epiphany, the Rocky montage about the learning and the churning and the earning, and then what was the better outcome. So the 5 stories that we heard were the hero's journey, parables, like these teachable points about your business, miracles or client testimonials told as a case study, the value story, like what is the value that you bring, and last is the product story. And oftentimes we lead with the product story, assuming that the client or prospect kind of can fill in the blanks for the value and the why and so forth. So this is kind of flipping that a little bit. So we'll go to breakout, and we'd love for each of you to just go around and kind of share, you don't necessarily have to practice out the whole story, because that might take too long, but just think about like a couple of key story concepts that maybe you could think about workshopping later, and see if that story concept resonates with your fellow community members. So for instance, Steve told us kind of his origin story about how things didn't go well and then they went well, right? So try it out and see if it's resonating with folks, and then we can workshop it at a follow-up meeting. All right, so Paul.
Yeah, I've got 4 rooms ready to go, and I've got a VIP in each room. So.
All right, so each room will have one of the steering committee
want?
members. Let's go to breakout for about 20 minutes, because I think it'll take a while for people to kind of noodle this out together. And then we'll come back to the main room here. We'll have some closing remarks. We'd love to hear what you learned, and then stick around afterwards for some extra networking. Oh, okay.
Oh,
well,
we're back.
Yes. We're back. Yes, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back.
I guess I showed my passion by telling that story.
Indeed, and your vulnerability too. So that's really important. Well, welcome back, everybody. So here's a chance for us, in a little bit of a larger group, just to share a little bit about what we learned, or something that you want to continue to discuss with some more folks. So who was able to kind of clarify their train wreck story? Yeah. And who has an example of a parable story that they would like to share?
I think Jayacinthi has sort of the ultimate train wreck story. It's short and it's really effective.
You want to practice, Jayanthi?
I did that over there. So we want me to go ahead, Danielle?
Go for it.
Oh, okay. 5 years ago, my mom fell ill and she had to take a lot of medications. She often forgot her medications and ended up in the hospitals multiple times. I used to call her every day to remind her or to find out if she has taken her medications. And it was really hard and I was anxious. So I wanted to look for some simple solutions for her. And that's how WatchRx was started. I make a smartwatch-based solution for her to take her medications on time. So that was my story. And you knew it too many times. So.
And now you have a national business. So, I think that's a great example of a hero's journey.
Yeah. Right. And I think too, Jayanthi, when you start with that core story, right, where you got into it for the love and care of your mom, who I think it's also important to let everybody know that she's 8,000 miles away in India while you're here in the US, right? Because, many of us are dealing with the remote caregiving. That's really remote. So like you have such an extreme example. that will draw people in. And I think too, once you say that now I help, not only mom with her medications, but we've also now added geofence wandering because we don't want, our loved ones to leave their safe environments. We've added, because I know you keep adding so many more features.
Yeah.
So I think you could use that as a jumping off point too.
Okay.
For all the other train, like the other mini train wrecks that could, happen after the big train wreck, Yeah.
I know.
I would,
Yeah.
I mean, that is a great story. I'm going to give just a little bit of feedback because I think it'll help. One, you can use it. The beginning. So from the minute you start, the train wreck is usually about 10%. Pain points are about 40%. So tell the train wreck and then go through pain points and start with the specific pain points. I would say, how did it make you feel? I lost sleep every night because I was wondering if my mom was taking her medication. And then she ended up in the hospital and it like made me rife with anxiety. I wasn't able to eat. I wasn't able to sleep. I was constantly worrying. It was affecting my marriage. Like if you start talking about those things, people are like, they immediately put themselves in there. So the more of that you can bring out in the start of the story, the more people will identify with you. And then you can say, so I created this app, right, that helps them take their medication and allows me to follow up with them, even when they're 8,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So even if your mom is down the street or if she's the next state over, or she could be halfway around the world, this will make sure. We've also added in, so the Rocky montage is where I talk about the other things, right? We've also added in geofencing so that you might describe what that is. So geofencing would be a really good parable story.
Yeah.
But that's, I would stick more. So it's 10% train wreck, 40% pain points, 10% epiphany, 30 to 40% Rocky montage, and then outcome.
Yeah, good.
For
Thank you.
quick
Yeah,
breaker.
that's good. Yeah. Danielle, you are on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry, I wanted to put that, or maybe Steve, can you put that in the chat? Because I think that's super helpful because my big question for everybody too is how short to make the stories, right? Because you can tend to lose the audience or get lost in the story and kind of lose the cadence, of the event that you're speaking at. So, what's the right length? So I love the idea of proportions. So 10% here. Oh,
I'm doing it.
Oh, you're doing it? Oh, fabulous. Thank you. All right. So great. So who else wants to give it a shot and get some like on the spot feedback?
Anybody have a miracle story or a parable?
Sure, I'll talk about my miracle story. Thanks for this opportunity. So I was speaking to somebody and they came to me and said, oh, I have just got notice that I'm going to be laid off in 6 weeks. I have 6 weeks to find my next job and I really want to figure this out. I really want to make it a meaningful next step. I don't just want to take the next job that comes along. And I said, well, I'd love to support you, work with you. I get what you're feeling, that you're really feeling frustrated and scared and uncertain. Your daughter's going off to college. You want to get this wrapped up in a certain time frame. I usually work with people over 10 weeks or 10 sessions, 6 months, but let's see what we can do in half that time. And we did it. She had 6 offers and she came up with a fabulous opportunity that fit into her lifestyle and the schedule that she wanted.
Pretty good.
Thanks, Steve. I have to say that Steve coached me in the breakout session.
And the more you repeat it, the better
Yes.
it'll get, the better it'll flow, right?
Right.
You'll know where to emphasize and like when to have that really dramatic pause and, the ratio of pain point to outcome. Yeah, nice.
Thanks, Danielle.
James, I saw you. Oh, sorry. I saw James go off mute. Would you like to share something?
No, I just get it. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Nothing special.
go ahead.
I'm going to ask a question that one of the biggest things that we've seen, this is outside of direct stories, but one of the biggest things that we have seen to change sales numbers is video testimonial. So how many people in here right now are getting testimonials from people? It is one of the most powerful things you can do. And the way that we do it. So anytime you have, does anyone do discovery calls? So if you have a conversation with somebody where you mention something. So Deborah, if you had a conversation with somebody at a party or a networking event and you were talking about this, if anyone mentioned anything interesting, you can send them an email, and the emails that I send, I find a case study. So I have more than 50 video case studies that are about 5 to 7 minutes of customers that I've helped. I find one that roughly aligns with them, and I'll send them a custom email. Hey, Deborah, it was so nice to meet you. I work with somebody else who is in the headhunting, help find a job space, and I just want to share their case study with you. There might be something in there that could really help you, maybe knock something loose. We all hear things differently. Hope you're having an awesome Friday. If there's anything I can do, let me know. That email will almost always result in a call. So the framework that we just used for story, the way that I get video testimonials is literally, hey, Jill, I just helped you build a webinar. Everything went really great. I know you said you got a lot of really good sales, whatever from it. Would you mind jumping on a short call with me just so I can recap exactly what we did? Then when they get on the call, so what were you struggling with in the beginning? Why did you hire me? What was one really big thing that I helped you do? What were some ways that I helped you support through it? And what was the outcome that you got? Those are the questions. I will send that entire video. I'll just upload it as an unlisted YouTube and send it to people. And I don't edit myself out. I don't edit it either. Everybody's worried about editing, but don't edit it. Just leave it be really real and raw because they'll trust it. If somebody misspeaks, if somebody, drops an F-bomb, who cares? Lets people know that it's a real video. That's a way that you can use a story. And I would highly recommend it because it works better than anything else because it's not your words, it's somebody else.
I love it. So Steve, one more time, what technology do you use to do that? Do you use any kind of particular software to make that happen? How do we?
I just use Zoom. I record it on Zoom. Super easy. Who in here knows what Infusionsoft is? Does anyone know what Infusionsoft is? So I was an Infusionsoft certified partner. It is the most confusing tech platform in the world. Over the years, I've done all the big crazy tech stuff. I have found that simple works better than anything else. So I use ConvertKit is my email platform. I use YouTube. I use Vimeo. So YouTube, if you embed a YouTube video on your website, what happens when they're done watching it is they get all the previews for the other stuff. So if you're embedding it somewhere, you want to use Vimeo. But I use Zoom I do my webinars in Zoom, and I don't use Zoom webinar. I just use a regular Zoom meeting, just like we're doing here, because it's easy. It doesn't mess anything up.
Good. Okay. No, that makes it super easy. All right. So who is sitting on another story that they want to share? Renee, you shared a very compelling hero journey. You want to share it with the larger group?
No, I think it's a little too long. So
okay. Okay. All right. Well, then with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you for sharing your stories and for that little bit of vulnerability that it takes to, reveal your own train wrecks. And so now we're really excited to see how you take the 5 different story archetypes and really work with them to create some marketing content for your company. And then even use that as the video testimonial concept. I would love to hear some feedback of who tried that. So we're at the end of our scheduled time, but as you know, with Founders of F55, we like to have the bonus networking afterwards, just kind of an open floor as if we're all hanging out at the, after event cocktails. So, and this is also a great time to ask the community if you need something specific. Like, are you looking for somebody who has a certain skill? Are you looking to learn something new? And that maybe somebody else might be able to help? Are you looking to meet somebody that could be helpful to your business? So open floor. And first of all, before we do that, let me just say thank you to Steve. Thank you, Steve, for contributing your hard-earned wisdom. That
You're welcome.
And of course, thank you to the members of the Founders Over 55 Steering Committee. We're an all-volunteer group. We love doing this work because we love hanging out with you guys and see how your companies are growing. So, so with that, open mic. Who has something like that they're working on, like they're trying to achieve their next milestone, and they'd love a little conversation with some thought partners. Linda.
Instead of answering that question, I will say I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. That's a town getting a lot of notice. Anybody needs any help or connections that I could facilitate for you, please let me know. I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you, Patricia. And Patricia is a wonderful host. I will tell you that. When I flew into Nashville, she was so gracious to meet with me, and we explored some wonderful restaurants together. So, Linda, you started to raise your hand. Do you want to go off mute? Oh, wait, Linda, you've got to go off mute.
Sorry about that. I had told the people in the breakout session that I would love to have my own business someday. Unfortunately, it's not in the cards now. My background is in corporate B2B outside sales. I'm currently looking for a new sales position. So I'd love to hook up with you, Deb, and talk to you about your coaching and how you help that person get 6 job offers or interviews in a short period of time, or if anybody has any recommendations or leads for me, I'll put my email address in the chat, and I greatly appreciate it. Or if anyone has, if they want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if I can help you find referrals or leads for your business, I'd be glad to.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Great. Anybody else have anything else they want to share? Great. I think we're good. So Paul, thank you so much for running the tech behind the scenes. Jerry, thanks so much for your help in organizing. Steve, again, for contributing your valuable time and wisdom. And we wish you all a wonderful holiday season, and stay in touch. Reach out to us. Check out foundersover55.com. You'll see a video of this event posted in the next couple of weeks or so. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. We're excited because one of our steering committee members, Mary Cronin, who I'm sure you've seen at previous events, has just published a book about entrepreneurship at 50. And so we'll be highlighting some of the folks that she interviewed for that book at an upcoming event in Q1 of next year. So stay tuned for that date. And also let us know what topics you'd like to see covered in more depth. A couple of weeks ago, we partnered with Encore Boston and a couple of other groups, the Job Seekers Over 50 group here in Massachusetts, and did an in-depth workshop on LinkedIn, like how to really embellish your LinkedIn or reframe it based on the kinds of customers that you want to attract. That was a free 90-minute session. There's going to be a follow-up deep dive 3-hour workshop, which there will be a fee associated with that, where you really actually get to work on your own LinkedIn profile with an expert who can help you flesh that out. So be on the lookout for that invitation. I think the date is somewhere in January. I don't have it published right now. And as always, we'd love to hear from you, like what other content we can offer. in this kind of format, as well as any other types of formats that you'd like us to experiment with that could be most helpful. Would it be these small, like kind of breakout groups? Would you like, for instance, like some pitch fests? Would you like us to bring in some more experts? And if so, who are those experts that you're following that you'd love for us to invite? And we'd happy to reach out on your behalf. All right, so with that, thank you, everybody. Enjoy your night.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your holidays.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
guys.
Have
Bye.
a nice evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye now.